Hello, and thank you for joining us this morning for our press conference against Bill C-7. My name is Bonnie Brayton, and I'm the National Executive Director of the Disabled Women's Network, Dawn Canada. If you require interpretation, please select the interpretation button in the Zoom bar and select your language preference. If you do not select a language, you will hear the language from the floor. Si vous avez besoin d'interprétation, sélectionnez la touche à l'interprétation sur la barre Zoom et choisissez la langue préférée. Si vous ne sélectionnez pas de langue, vous entendrez celle utilisée au cours de la rencontre. To start our press conference this morning, I call on Krista Carr, Executive Vice President of Inclusion Canada, to provide opening remarks. This event will be presented in English with ASL and LSQ interpretation and English CART captioning. To turn on CART captioning, go to the toolbar along the bottom of your screen and click the arrow next to the closed captioning button. An option menu will appear. Click Show Subtitle. ASL and LSQ interpreters will be visible on camera, and their videos are pinned for convenience. I remind media and all participants to remain on mute with your cameras off unless you're intervening. Inclusion Canada's Executive Vice President, Krista Carr, will provide opening remarks. Krista?
Thank you very much, Bonnie. Merci, Bonnie. I would like to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. While we meet today on a virtual platform, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the land which we all call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all Inuit and First Nations people and the chosen home of the Métis. My name is Krista Carr. I'm the Executive Vice President of Inclusion Canada, formerly the Canadian Association for Community Living, a national federation of 13 provincial territorial associations and over 300 local associations across Canada, working on behalf of people with an intellectual disability and their families. Inclusion Canada has been involved in the discussion around medical assistance in dying since we intervened in the Carter case. Our biggest fear has always been that having a disability would become an acceptable reason for state-provided suicide. Bill C-7 is our worst nightmare. Bill C-7 is reckless legislation, and the Government of Canada was reckless in its formation and its rush to push it through Parliament. A letter to the government from the United Nations Special Rapporteurs on the rights of persons with disabilities, the rights of older persons, and on extreme poverty and human rights confirms this assessment. This letter to government, which was made public merely a few hours ago and will be provided to the media following this, in these United Nations bodies call Bill C-7's expansion of MAID to persons with disabling conditions who are not dying a violation of Canada's human rights obligations under various international treaties. Never before has such a matter of life and death in this country been pushed through in such haste, given such little consideration, and being denied a hearing at the Supreme Court. The Minister of Justice and Attorney General has been reckless in refusing to appeal the Truchon-Gladue decision, striking down the end of life requirement for MAID that is now in the criminal code, and reckless in their message to Parliament and to Canadians that they had no choice, that the courts had spoken. The courts, including the Supreme Court, have not spoken. The consultation leading up to the drafting of the bill was reckless in the treatment it gave to the voices of Canadians with disabilities and their representative organizations. The result is a reckless piece of legislation that makes disability itself the cause of disproportionate suffering experienced by Canadians with disabilities, which is actually born of poverty, oppression, violence, isolation, and lack of support to live good lives. Just like the disproportionate rates of mental illness and suicidality and suffering that are borne by Indigenous, racialized, members of the LGBTQS+ community, and others, is born not of these personal characteristics, but of the injustice and inequality in Canadian society. We need senators to fulfill their role of last resort in Canadian democracy, to assure that the voices of minorities are not silenced. As you will hear today, and given all the serious, multiple, and conflicting flaws to this bill, acknowledged during the Senate committee review, and as lives are at risk, significant risk, the Senate must take the only responsible possible action to end this recklessness. People with a disability do not need to die. This bill needs to die, and we urge our senators and MPs to let it die on the floor of both the Senate and Parliament. I would now like to introduce you to our moderator for today, a recognized leader in both the feminist and disability movements. Bonnie Brayton has been the National Executive Director of the Disabled Women's Network, DAWN Canada, since May 2007. In this role, she has proven herself a formidable advocate for women with disabilities here in Canada and internationally. During her tenure with DAWN Canada, Ms. Brayton has worked diligently to highlight key issues that impact the lives of women and girls with disabilities. Over to you, Bonnie.
Each of our 5 speakers will briefly comment on their concerns about Bill C7, which will be followed by our question and answer period of approximately 10 a.m. If you have any questions, I would ask you to please use the raise hand function on Zoom, and I will call upon you at the appropriate time. Merci beaucoup, Krista, et merci à tous nos invités et les membres de la média. Je vous adresse aujourd'hui de le territoire Kanakara non cédé, et je tiens à nous rappeler toutes et tous que nous sommes dans le temps de la vérité et de la réconciliation avec les peuples autochtones de ce territoire, et que cela n'est pas juste une belle phrase, mais une promesse, un devoir. This morning, I'm honored to moderate this distinguished panel to Prime Minister Trudeau, to his cabinet, to all parliamentarians, and with special acknowledgement to the Senate, who wisely amended the Accessible Canada Act with an important preamble that reminds us that throughout the legislation and its application, we must be particularly mindful of intersecting forms of discrimination, as Krista reminded us earlier. And so we remind and ask all of you for your attention and your somber reflection this morning. Canada spent more than 2 years working on the development of the Accessible Canada Act. The very fact that there has been a serious, organized and very vocal position from dozens and dozens of disability organizations, from the community to the national to the UN Special Rapporteur in opposition to C7, is because the Accessible Canada Act has helped to build momentum towards an inclusive Canada. Canada and the provinces and territories recently signed the optional protocol on the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, but deconstructing deep systemic discrimination takes time. This pandemic has shown us how deep it goes for so much, and so much more for others, pardon me. The panel before you today can and will speak to why Bill C7 must not go forward. And so let's get started. Our first speaker is Jonathan Marchand. Jonathan is a self-advocate who has fought tirelessly against long-term institutionalization and who has an experience of being personally offered MAID because of his disability. Jonathan, merci.
Merci, Bonnie. People often ask me, what is it like to live in a state-run long-term care facility? When you get warehoused into an institution, there's one thing you are made to understand quickly. Give up all hope of making your own decisions in your life. You no longer have the choice of where you're going to live and who you're going to live with. Your love life, it's over. You can't live with your partner. Your private life, forget it. A record is kept on your every move. Do you want to work? There's no assistance for that. You must become and stay poor. You are now the property of the government. Now it is managers, civil servants, nurses, and others who will decide when you get up, go to bed, eat, wash, and use the toilet. You're too independent for their taste. They will break you. You have to be a good, kind, obedient, grateful little cripple. If you are a recalcitrant, plans will be put in place to restrain you until you submit. You are no longer in control of your life. Death is your only escape from this weird dystopian nightmare. What is offered to us is only the bare minimum necessary for our physical survival and does not allow us to be included, participate, and contribute to Canadian society. We live in segregation from the rest of you, and if COVID-19 doesn't get you, despair will. Within the walls of the institution, you are also isolated. Healthcare professionals must treat you as a patient, a medical object of care, or risk being sued and losing their jobs. You no longer have genuine human contact with people. You come to question your human worth. And by being touched by 1,000 people for your personal care, you lose your personal integrity and disconnect yourself from your own body. It's very easy to internalize that you are a deeply ill person, that it is your fault, that your life is worthless, that you have to be content with the little you are provided, that you are an object of charity and pity, and that it is better to die than to be like you. Most people with severe disabilities live in institutions across Canada. The others cling to living at home, but often find themselves also isolated. Many have committed suicide or have accepted euthanasia to avoid suffering my fate. We are being abused, excluded, deprived of our autonomy, and exploited. We are objects of profits in a system that dehumanizes us. When you lose all choice and control over your life, is it really surprising people want to die? The state is responsible for this situation after decades of inaction. And we should be thankful that our abuser is willing to help us kill ourselves, and all that in the name of autonomy and choice. What an artless joke. Our lives are worth living. We don't want your final solution. Death with dignity doesn't exist without life with dignity. Bill C7 needs to be killed, not us. Thank you.
You're on mute, Bonnie.
Merci beaucoup, Jonathan. Thank you for that very powerful intervention. And now I'm very honored to introduce Mr. Corey Earl, the President of People First of Canada, who would like to share his perspective on Bill C7 as a self-advocate. Thank you, Corey.
Thank you, Bonnie, and good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having us here today to speak on this very important issue. My name is Corey Earl. I am the President of People First of Canada. People First is a national voice for people labeled with intellectual and developmental disabilities. This is not the first time I've spoken about the medical assistance in dying laws that affect us. As I stand before you this morning, I am torn between feeling anger and defeat. I'm angry about the shameful history Canada has when it comes to how people with intellectual and developmental disabilities have been treated. This is a history of being labeled as less than because of our disability. This is a history of being put in an institution and taken away from our families. This is the history of being excluded from society. This is a history of being denied the right to decide. This is the history of being sterilized by government laws. This is the history of being excluded in schools. This is the history of poverty and unemployment. This is the history of abuse and assault. This is the history of exclusion and rights violations. This is a history of hurt. I wonder if you even know that people with disabilities are one of the groups in society that are often harmed and sometimes killed by our families or caregivers who are supposed to protect them. Since 1993, more than 30 people with disabilities have been murdered by their families and or caregivers in our country. Sometimes people have control over our decision making. It's another shameful fact that I am angry about. And some of this history is still happening in this country. It's not the past. For many of us, this is our present. This is where my anger turns into feeling of defeat because I don't know how to convince you. I don't know how to make you understand. I can't make you see the issue through the eyes of the most vulnerable in our society. I can't make you feel the fear we do. I can't make you live the life where your rights have been an afterthought. I can't make you understand of living under the constant risk of threat of losing housing or support, or being placed wherever there is a free bed, or having someone take away from your right to decide. I can't make you understand what it feels like to have a society that thinks your life is not worth living. It doesn't have value. That the opportunity to be dead as soon as possible is better than the right to live our own lives right now. I don't want to feel angry and defeated. I want to feel accepted and included. So our members, people with intellectual and developmental disabilities across our country, I urge you to not expand medical assistance in dying. I urge you to end the shameful history that we have lived and continue to live in this country. I urge you to not be part of the history of exclusion and devaluing the lives of Canadians with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Corey. That was very powerful. And I hope people are listening. I'm very pleased to introduce Mads Clement. Mads is a queer, disabled, Métis, and Anishinaabe student living in Hamilton. They will discuss Indigenous oppression in healthcare and their personal research about home care for Indigenous peoples as an alternative to MAID. Over to you, Mads. Thanks.
Thank you, Bonnie. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mads Clement. I use they, them pronouns, and I am a queer, disabled, Métis, and Anishinaabe person living in Hamilton, Ontario. I am here today to discuss how the push for wider usage of medical assistance in dying, or MAID, will harm Indigenous communities. Firstly, I would like to mention that while I'm honored to be here to represent my people in this important discussion, it is a privilege that I am here and I do not represent all Indigenous voices. I would very much encourage conversation with other Indigenous people with regards to this bill, and especially those living on reservations who will be hit even harder by the widespread use of MAID. Secondly, I would also like to mention that some of the points I will be discussing today were sent to me by River Holland Valad, another disabled Métis person who could not make it to this conference today. I thank them for providing me with helpful information and broadening my knowledge of this issue. To start, Indigenous people have long had reason to distrust the Canadian healthcare system, and Bill C7 will only strengthen this distrust. One reason why Indigenous people do not trust the Canadian healthcare system includes the experimentation on Indigenous children that occurred within residential schools. Another is the advent of new diseases such as tuberculosis and smallpox that came with colonialism and wiped Indigenous groups out. When the tuberculosis epidemic was at its height, the Canadian healthcare system refused to admit Indigenous people to sanatoriums, as Indians were a dying breed not worth investing time and money in. If we push for something like Bill C7, which will hit Indigenous people particularly hard, this distrust in the healthcare system will only increase. Instead of pushing for more liberal application of MAID, we should consider funding alternative methods of care that will increase quality of life and allow people to be ill and live and die in dignity. Home care is one example of this. When I was in high school, I had the privilege of working with the Canadian Home Care Association for 2 summers, where I was assigned a research project of looking into home care specific to Indigenous peoples. While the home care sector is woefully underfunded already, the near complete lack of home care resources for Indigenous people was shocking. There was a complete failure to address these needs, both on and off the res. Home care and other alternatives, such as palliative care, hospice care, long-term care, and so on, are important to letting those who need a little extra care live dignified lives. When we provide no alternatives to MAID and push it as the only option when dealing with incurable disease or symptoms of suicidality, we are effectively telling disabled, ill, and neurodivergent people that their lives are not worth living. Groups such as Indigenous tribes, where many people are disabled, ill, and neurodivergent, partially due to the abhorrent conditions on reservations and mistreatment by the general Canadian population, would effectively be told that their lives are not worth continuing. This is unacceptable and a continuation of the harms perpetuated against our people. Indigenous people have long been told that our lives are inferior to the lives of other Canadians, and this would only further that notion. After hundreds of years of oppression, we deserve better than knowing that when we become too ill to take care of ourselves, that our only option is death and not care from the community. When I was asked to speak today, one of the first things I thought of was our elders. In most, if not all, Indigenous cultures in Canada, our elders are very important to us. They carry our stories, our language, our songs, our teaching, our crafts, and our medicines. When they grow old and cannot live without extra help, and they are offered nothing but physician-assisted death, we lose massive pieces of our culture. This will lead to further loss of knowledge and decimation of Indigenous groups across the country. Our older relatives deserve not MAID, but to be cared for in a culturally sensitive way by the community that they have spent so long nurturing, teaching, and uplifting. In conclusion, I would encourage everyone present today to reflect on the impact that pushing MAID as an option would have on Indigenous communities. Every day we occupy stolen land, and the least we can do is provide adequate care for those we have displaced instead of offering them death. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Matt. So much wisdom and common sense in everything that you said. Really appreciate it very much. And now it's my great honor to introduce my friend and colleague, Mr. Steve Esty. Steve is an international human rights consultant with over 25 years of experience, and in fact was one of the very proud people from Canada who joined the UN in New York to write the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. It's my great honor to introduce again my dear friend, Steve Esty.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. It's rather humbling for me to speak after such powerful interventions. It's a very complicated set of questions we have here in some ways. I just wanted to share with you some of my own experience. As Bonnie said, I was involved with the drafting of the UN Convention. I was a civil society advisor to the Government of Canada in those days from 2003 to 2006. And this was a kind of a new construct in the UN system, because what happened was countries from around the world came together to develop a convention on the rights of people with disabilities. And they sent the people that they usually send. They sent their lawyers and they sent their negotiators and all of these kinds of folks. And very quickly, they realized that they didn't really understand the nuances of being a person with a disability. And the way that Corey spoke about a little while ago, you know, it was very difficult for these people to talk about the human rights of people with disabilities because they had no lived experience of it. So very quickly, we adopted the mantra of nothing about us without us. And that became the thing that we said over and over and over again during the convention negotiations. And if you look at the treaty itself, in Article 4.3, it talks very specifically about the fact that you need to involve people with disabilities and our organizations in the development of legislation that concerns us. And that's not some kind of nice, friendly thing to do. It's common sense. You can't develop good legislation if you don't have an experience of what it's like to be the person who's being legislated. So through the fabric of the convention, you see the need to engage people with disabilities. So it's troubling for me because, you know, this is almost 20 years ago, and the Canadian government in those days, I think we could say, was really one of the forefront governments in the drafting of the treaty. There were 5 or 6 countries from around the world that really supported the work very strongly, and the Canadian government was one of them. And now we fast forward 16, 17 years, and what we see instead is the UN coming to Canada and saying, hey guys, what's this MAID business about? Just this morning, I got a document from the Special Rapporteur on disability rights and the Special Rapporteur on extreme poverty and the Special Rapporteur on older people. 3 UN experts have written to the government of Canada as of last Wednesday to say, have you really thought this through? We're very, very deeply concerned that what you're doing reinforces ableist understanding of people with disabilities. Have you looked at other alternatives? Have you talked to people with disabilities? They're asking these questions. And I'm sorry, but the answer is no, you haven't talked to us. We tried to talk to you, you haven't listened. And here we are at the 11th hour. It's just absolutely appalling to me that we go from being 20 years ago at the forefront of drafting this hallmark human rights legislation to here today, the UN is coming to us and saying, have you even talked to them? How do you get from here to here? We need to put a pause on this because something very seriously wrong is happening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. Very powerful intervention, and indeed, why? Why now? Why? And so it is my absolute honor also to introduce a young woman who's been very outspoken throughout the last few weeks, has been outspoken for a number of years, and has successfully led the Disability Justice Network of Ontario, Ms. Sarah Jama. Thank you.
Thank you for that introduction, Bonnie. My name is Sarah Jama, and I'm based out of Hamilton, Ontario with the Disability Justice Network of Ontario. So 2 days ago, I was grabbing a plate from my kitchen cabinet and my knee popped out of its socket and I fell down. And so in a span of about half an hour, I had to figure out how to push my knee socket back in place and climb up back into my wheelchair because I was home alone. And in that 30 minutes, I thought about this conversation around Bill C-7 and medical assistance in dying. I thought about how my body will change over time. I'm 26 now, but what life is going to be like with cerebral palsy as I age and lose control over my body. and how my value in society will shift according to my ability or inability to produce, and how everybody's body will change. But how instead of building supports for people to move into disability and join disability community, palliative care is not a universally accepted and given right in Canada, how access to medication is not a universal accepted and given right in Canada, how a basic income is not a universal right in Canada, and how in fact our governments have legislated people into poverty across this country simply for being disabled. So if you can't work, your only options for income are social assistance rates that keep people in poverty. I thought about how accessible and affordable housing doesn't exist in this country, how assistive technology isn't a universal right and isn't fully funded, and how people are living in extreme poverty for no reason other than disability across this country. In my city in Hamilton, there are multiple encampments of people with disabilities living in tents outside in the winter or on the street who get kicked out of shelters simply for disability-related disruptions, and who get banned from shelters. And again, there's almost no housing that is both accessible and affordable. And I thought a lot about DeAndre Campbell, a Black man in Brampton who literally called for help from police and support and ended up killed by police, who knew that he needed support at the time it was reported that he had schizophrenia. I thought about Regis Pakinski-Perchat. I thought about Abdirahman Abdi, both Black people who have been killed at times when they should have been given disability-related supports in Canada. I thought about Joyce Echaquan, an Indigenous woman who literally recorded and live streamed her death, and how medical professionals incompetently were spewing racist rhetoric toward her right before she died in a hospital bed. And I thought about people like Roger Foley and Chris Gladders, who in Hamilton, a Hamilton man who access made and lived in terrible conditions before he died, sat in his urine and in feces for weeks before accessing MAID, who his family said publicly that he accessed MAID simply because there were no other options of supports. Our senators and elected officials have made the decision to push forward Bill C-7 to make death accessible to any disabled person without supporting the rights to live. They're listening to Dying with Dignity lobbies, who predominantly represent upper middle class white people in our country who are afraid to live with disability and see death as dignity without talking and supporting life with dignity. Senators and legislators have not grappled with the consequences of medical racism and coercion in our systems, how Black and Indigenous people continue to be killed by systems that are supposed to serve and protect, and how this will not go away by making medical assistance in dying more accessible and reducing funding for things like palliative care. Bill C-7 is anti-working class, racist, and ableist, and senators are now debating a sunset clause to make it more accessible for people with mental health disabilities to kill themselves as a form of treatment without making mental health supports free. So for people who are grappling with suicidality and go in for treatment, who could potentially be offered MAID in lieu of supports and actual funded care, this is going to, across the board, lead to more people with disabilities choosing death because of no other options. We've heard since the beginning of the pandemic from people across this country who are considering MAID simply because they can't afford their medications. And for our government to disregard all of our testimonies, to disregard what the United Nations is saying around how this is harmful for people with disabilities in our country is a complete disgrace. As my friend Gabrielle Peters so eloquently said in her testimony last week, we're asking you to kill Bill C-7 or you'll kill disabled people. This is a moment in our history where if these decisions are made, it's going to be completely difficult to walk back. And we can't just continue to center the voices of Nicole Gladue and people who have condos and had a lifestyle like of free will and of choice, while also sentencing people with disabilities who live in poverty and conditions that are themselves irredeemable to a situation where they will choose death, because this is death by coercion. It's death by senators and our legislated officials providing no other options for people to choose to live. I don't want this in my future, and neither do the many disabled people who are speaking up against this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And I want to thank all of our panelists for these very powerful interventions and for the facts that they lay bare to the media who are here with us today. And so without further ado, I want to turn this over to the media for some questions. Let's open it up. Just a reminder again to use the raise hand function in Zoom, and we'll call upon you in order as we see you. When your name is called, please unmute and ask your question. And I'm new at this, so if I need some help, there's people to support that here. So, hands up. I'm supposed to be looking in the participant box, right? Somebody from Texas.
Yeah, that's correct. There are no hands up currently.
Okay. All right. Well, I was going to say we'll give the folks from the media a minute, and I was going to say I'll open it up to the panelists with a couple of questions so we can really get this discussion going.
Bonnie, actually, we have one question.
Okay.
Megan Gilmore.
Megan Gilmore, please go ahead. Thank you, Megan.
Hi, nice to speak to you again, Bonnie. I was just wondering if someone could give us an update about where we are right now after last week's testimonies. So we talked about the sunset clause. Is there anything else in specific that the Senate is considering right now?
Which one of my panelists would like to take this? Who have we got on the panel who'd like to take the question? I'm sorry, it's hard for me to see.
I can
Krista,
answer the
would you
question,
like to go
Bonnie.
ahead?
If there,
Please go ahead.
sure.
Thank you.
If there's no one else, we're not 100% sure what the Senate is considering at this moment. Bill, we believe that the debate on third reading will start this week. There was no amendments made to the bill at committee. I believe there was an agreement to hold all amendments on the bill to third reading. And so what all the things are that they're considering, I couldn't actually say, but I guess what we would say collectively as a disability rights community in this country is that we want them to vote the bill down. You cannot amend away the fundamental problem with this bill unless you completely got the second track that they have added to the bill, which will allow for people with disabilities to access medical assistance in dying when they are not actually dying and when their death is not reasonably foreseeable.
Thank you, Krista. I don't see any other hands up right now. If somebody does put up their
Bonnie,
hand. Yeah.
I think we had in the chat, I think some people had said they had a question.
Okay, so I'm looking in the participant with the hand thing. So who is it in chat? If somebody can just help me with that. Because I've got the participant one open. I thought that was the.
That's Mon Almidi from the Canadian Press.
Please go ahead. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for sharing this with us. My question is for Sarah. I mean, if someone else wants to also comment, I would welcome that too. You said like you want the government to kill this bill, and Krista actually seconded this, saying that the government should vote the bill down. Don't you think? I mean, I was wondering if whether like adding amendment to the bill by maybe excluding people with disabilities with the scale of the bill would help. Maybe like is there like another solution possible from your perspective, like any amendment that would make the bill more acceptable for you?
So medical assistance in dying already exists, and for me personally, I'm not against medical assistance in dying. It already exists for people with terminal illness. But as the United Nations has already said publicly numerous times, to amend it to make it accessible for people with disabilities is discriminatory. It's saying that disabled people have the right to be killed by doctors, No one else does. And so there's no amendment that will make this okay, an okay part of our Canadian history. This bill needs to be killed, and they need to get rid of Track 2.
Thank you, Sarah. Anyone else want to add to that? Okay. Anything else in the chat that I have a question? Okay. No, that was Mon's question. I'll put one to the panel for now while we're waiting for another question and see who wants to pick this up. Throughout the debate, the government has been adamant in saying we consulted. From the perspective of disability rights community, is Mr. Lametti's claim accurate? Are your concerns about the dangers of Bill C7 reflected in this bill? And I think we heard from Steve earlier. Please, let's build off that. Thank you.
I can start. No. Minister Lametti keeps saying that it's a small group of people who are dissenting, but he hasn't talked to any Black people that, as far as I know, I was the only Black person to testify at Senate, and the Indigenous community wasn't consulted. And you could tell that from the fact that every single Indigenous person who got up to speak, including doctors, were against this bill. And so, yes, Minister Lametti maybe consulted some people, but a lot of the people he consulted were upper middle class white people, doctors and lawyers, and that's not representative of the disability community.
Nothing like the consultations we saw around the Accessible Canada Act, that's for sure. Corey, over to you. Unmute, my friend.
Thanks, Bonnie. Absolutely, unequivocally not. In fact, people have been touched with disabilities and development disabilities. The voices have actually been 100% silent on it. Even trying to get a meeting at the Senate, we have not been able to get a meeting at the Senate committee to be able to address our concerns. And to me, that's shameful because it's the longer it silences the voice. I mean, unless you have ears of senators higher up, then chances are that you'll get a meeting. But we absolutely unequivocally have not had an opportunity to even address it. And even though we reached out and we just, again, once again, feel ignored by this very issue. And it's not just the Senate, it's the federal government, all levels, who really been silencing the voice on this issue.
Thank you, Corey. Matt, did you want to add something?
Yes. So as a member of the general public, I'm not like officially affiliated in any capacity with a disability group. Disabled people who are not necessarily vocal advocates, but just regular people have definitely not been consulted. The fact that I am here today speaking at this panel is kind of by chance. And I think that sort of shows that there has been little consideration of the disabled community outside of very vocal lobbying groups who are doing fantastic work. But the government only hears them because they are loud, and even then they barely hear them, and they have failed to consider just the average disabled person in the public sphere.
Thanks, Mads. Steve, and then Jonathan. You first, Steve, go ahead.
Thanks, Bonnie. Just to comment quickly about engaging people with disabilities and so on, I made reference to the fact that the special rapporteurs have written to the government of Canada. They wrote a letter to our ambassador in Geneva last week, and they asked very specifically in that letter about the kinds of alternative considerations that the government of Canada has given, what other options they asked. I'm not aware of any other options that are on the table, and I don't think anybody else in our community is either. So I think, you know, as we move forward with this, the UN is asking Canada some very, very pertinent questions, and I just don't see how the Senate of Canada, as the place for sober second thought, can ignore these questions. I mean, they're fundamental questions, and it's proceeded with such speed that there hasn't been an opportunity to ask any of them. So I think that, you know, senators have, at a bare minimum, to uphold international standards. The government makes laws and things. The UN is asking about these international standards and where our reference to those things have been in this process, and we're not able to answer the question. So it just boggles my mind that we could proceed without at least answering the questions that have been asked by the special rapporteurs. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Jonathan, est-ce que tu voulais faire une intervention?
Oui.
Vas-y.
And actually, Mr. Lanetti is saying that he listened to us because he listened to those who want to die. Right? That's his answer to that. He did listen to us, but only to one side of the coin. And the other reason why the government is not listening is that if they are truly listening, they will have to do something about the underlying conditions that push people toward medical assistance in dying. And that's would implicate a reform of our support system. And there's no, they're not willing to go there. They're not willing to change things truly for people with disabilities in this country. So that's why there's no incentive for the government to listen, and because they'll have to do something about that. So, and there are solutions. I mean, many groups have pushed the government to implement solutions, community living solutions. I've been doing that in Quebec for many years now. It's incredibly difficult. We're not being heard, and the status quo needs to be maintained at all costs for the government. And you see it with the COVID-19 crisis. Thousands of people across Canada died in long-term care facilities. And what's the solution for this government? It's more long-term care facilities. So in Quebec and in Ontario, that's what they're going to do. And there's no plan to put in place real community living solutions. So that's the state of affairs, and it's incredibly disingenuous from this government.
Thank you, Jonathan. Do we have a question? Denis? No? Okay, just I saw the camera. I'm going to add a little something myself, although I'm the moderator, to this discussion around, I think, a couple of things that really come forward for when we think about the way the government consulted on the Accessible Canada Act, and in moving forward with the optional protocol on the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. We finally have an opportunity to really bring people with disabilities to the table everywhere, at the community level, the provincial level, at the national and international level. And then the government does a 360. And here we are with Bill C7, a piece of legislation that has taken all of us off of our day jobs and made us all feel the urgency of focusing on this bill because of the implications for people with disabilities. So I think, the tension for all of us around this is clearly our complete surprise that a government that has been so focused on human rights, on women's rights, to be really clear, as a feminist, as a person with a disability, and the head of the executive director of Dawn Canada, to find myself looking square in the face of what is intersectional discrimination in the form of legislation being presented by the same government, by the same Senate, by the same Parliament, that put a preamble in the Accessible Canada Act that warned about intersectional discrimination and its perils with special regard to women and girls with disabilities, for the very reason that we should understand 24% of women in Canada live with a disability. We have the highest rates of gender-based violence, the highest rates of poverty, and yet here we are focused on C7 instead of on these issues. Would love to have another intervention. Sarah, something you want to build off from there?
Bonnie, we actually have a second question from Megan.
Oh, super. Megan, please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Thanks. One of the things that is interesting when we talk about the consultation process is that consultation that happened at the beginning of 2020 happened after the Gladue-Truchon decision in 2019. So I'm just wondering, with a decision that the government did not appeal. So I'm just wondering, what are the legal options right now that the federal government could use if it so chooses?
I'm so glad there's other people on this panel who can answer that question. Who can help us with Megan's question? Krista.
I don't mind jumping in.
Thank you.
So to answer your question, Megan, it is quite unprecedented. We can't find any other situation where the government has moved so quickly to amend the Criminal Code of Canada based on a decision made by one judge in one trial court. So that's your base level court in one province. Typically, they would appeal that all the way to the Supreme Court and have the Supreme Court rule. And once that happens, that binds all courts. But a decision of one trial court in one province is actually not binding on anybody. We have courts across Canada that strike down provisions in the criminal code all the time, mandatory minimum sentences, all of those types of things. And until either many courts across the country have made those same decisions, and or it's gone through appeal court and to Supreme Court, typically the government doesn't move to change its legislation. And in this case, we've all been told, oh, well, we have no choice. But the fact of the matter is that's not actually true. It's a red herring. If we do nothing, if we don't change the criminal code based on the Truchon-Gladu decision in Quebec, the decision will take effect in Quebec. But even in Quebec, courts, another case could be brought forward in Quebec, and another trial court would not be bound by that decision because it wasn't a decision of the appeal court in Quebec. So Canadians are very much being misled about the fact that this is a court-imposed decision that we must do something. The only court that binds all courts in Canada is the Supreme Court. And our issue was clearly not important enough to get a hearing at that level. And so the lives of people with disabilities are being judged by the decision of one judge in one province based on evidence in one case. Thanks.
Thanks, Krista. Over to you, Steve. I can see you're ready to give us some additional perspective. Thank you.
Thanks, Bonnie. I just wanted to build a little bit on what you'd said, because, as a disabled Canadian and someone who's been deeply involved in the work around the convention, and then subsequently quite involved, as you were referring to, around the work on the ACA, the Accessible Canada Act, and it's been really, really refreshing to me over the last number of years, the engagement of the Government of Canada around disability issues with the ACA and with other things. I mean, we've really had a reawakening of our community in so many ways, and it's been so refreshing. I mean, I've had the opportunity to meet with the Prime Minister and talk about disability issues, and I was quite overwhelmed by the fact that he would make that effort to do that, but it happened. So we have this on the one hand, and then on the other hand, as Chris is saying, this lightning fast process around Bill C7, and my overwhelming sense is one of confusion. I don't understand how, on the one hand, we can be so engaged in trying to have the voices of people with disabilities front and center and guiding our legislation on things like accessibility, on ramps and elevators and all of that kind of stuff. But when it comes to the very essence of life itself, we're not even speaking to people with disabilities. I just don't understand what the rationale for that is. And if somebody could explain it to me, I'd be very pleased. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. I think it's the question we're all asking ourselves and trying to understand in terms of why the hurry, why now, why without us, when up until now there's been so much hope for an inclusive Canada, for a Canada that is focused on intersectional human rights. And then we find C7 in front of us, and I think all of us who have have spent the last several months with us kind of split screen in terms of this Canada, the Canada that is so focused on Indigenous issues, so focused on finally addressing systemic racism, so focused on gender equality and ending gender-based violence. But to sit here with C7 in front of us and the Accessible Canada Act and the optional protocol behind us is perplexing us all. And indeed, for any media who are paying attention, pay attention to the facts that the majority of human rights complaints in this country for more than a decade have been disability related, speaks to why the Accessible Canada Act, the optional protocol were so important, and why all of us who sit in civil society roles to protect and defend the rights of people with disabilities are wondering why this legislation is before us, why we are having this discussion in light of COVID-19 and the impacts it's had and the extreme systemic discrimination it has revealed. Sarah, can I ask you to wrap us up with a little bit of reflection from earlier today and everything we've seen over the last few weeks?
Yeah, thank you, Bonnie. From my perspective, what we've seen over the last few weeks is the problem with the ways our systems are functioned to prioritize the voices of the wealthy, the voices of people in proximity to positions of power, voices of ministers who have personal relationships with people who are deciding legislation, right? And I see the prioritization of people without disabilities over people with disabilities around an issue that's going to kill many people during a pandemic in Canada. We have a Liberal government who continuously says that they want to build a society where we're all going to recover from this pandemic while also making it easier for us to die, while also not including disabled people in the emergency response benefits and things like this. And so I think we need to really critically ask ourselves, why are these decisions being made? Why is it easier to access dying than it is to access the right to live in Canada? Thank you.
Yes, indeed. A good life before we can talk about a good death. Thank you so much, Sarah. I want to thank everybody who participated in this panel, to all the participants, to the interpreters and supports that we received, to the media who have attended. We hope you will take this story and tell it again and again and again until we kill Bill C7. And of course, with that, I'll turn it over to Krista Carr to say thank you once again to Inclusion Canada and their team for organizing this press conference this morning. And a special thanks, of course, to all our panelists. Merci beaucoup. Thank you. Midwich.
Thank you all very much. I want to say a special thank you to the panelists. We have a full panel of people with disabilities speaking their own truths. And these are the voices that are not being heard in this debate. And there's many, many, many more of them. And I would just encourage the media to please follow up. If you'd like to interview any of these speakers, you can please contact Mark Mushler. His contact information is on the media advisory, and that includes Bonnie as well, if you'd like to interview her. And you can really help us get the word out here. So thank you for coming this morning. And again, this bill has got to be stopped, or it will end the life of people, way, 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 way too many people with disabilities who feel they have no other options. And we don't do that for any other group of people. We address suffering in Canadian society by suicide prevention and intervention, and by telling people we can help them get a better life. We do not give them drive-through access to the lethal injection. So please, we need our senators and MPs to listen to us and kill this bill. Thank you all for joining us today. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. And thank you again to our panel, excellent panelists.